Welcome back to Historical Biography. Today we're going to talk about Nelson Mandela, who is a very important figure in African history, um, as well as cooperate with me. All right. Well, he's a very important figure in African and African American history because of his role in the end of apartheid and the liberation of South Africa from white control. So let's talk a little bit about him, and we can see why he's so important. So, when South Africa became independent from Britain, the white minority took over the country and kind of instituted these sweeping rules governing race relations in the country. Basically, that was like the main focus of the majority of the law of the land, how whites and blacks interacted with each other. And these rules came to be known as apartheid. So they were these big kind of sweeping rules, even more in some ways strict than the Jim Crow laws in America. Basically, they sent out delegations to other nations with racial strife, like the United States, saw what we did to institutionalize racism, and then they stepped it up a notch. That's how inherently wrong apartheid was. They took it a step further than even we could. Now, let's talk a little bit about Mandela himself. Move this over so you can see him there. Mandela was born in 1918, and he grew up in South Africa just after England gave up control of the area. He kind of was born into the post-colonial South Africa. And during his time at university and directly after, the National Party came to power, which is the party that institutionalized racism. And he ended up being subjected to that at school often because he was the only black student at his law school. So during that time, he joined the ANC, which is the African National Congress. Mandela became increasingly political, fighting back against racist institutions that were controlling the country. So he was politicized by his experiences with racism. Like I said, he attended the University of Witwatersrand, what a name, right? Where he faced open racism because he was the only black African student there. He studied. That's not right. That's not his name. Oops, typos, they happen. Mandela studied law and became a lawyer before joining the ANC. And it was in school that he met liberal and communist European, Jewish, and Indian students that all kind of united under their persecution, right? These are all the different people that were being targeted by the Nationalist Party. And so they were all kind of joining together to fight back. However, upon the election of the racist Nationalist Party, right, Mandela helped organize and lead many campaigns of defiance. These campaigns included general strikes, nonviolent resistance to unjust laws, protests, the things that Martin Luther King was doing, right? He was, like Martin Luther King Jr., heavily influenced by Gandhi. So he had studied Gandhi and his nonviolent movement in India, and so he figured if it would work there, it could work here too. During these campaigns, martial law was imposed, and many were imprisoned or punished, including Mandela, for numerous different crimes. Now, eventually, Mandela and the rest of the ANC leadership were arrested for treason in 1956, following calls to dismantle the state of racism in South Africa. Although he was acquitted of treason, Mandela would find himself in the courtroom numerous times until he was finally charged and found guilty of sabotage and inciting guerrilla warfare. Basically, at one point, the ANC had decided to start stockpiling weapons just in case they were needed to take back the country. And of course, when the government found out that this was happening, they didn't like that, right? And so they were trying to find ways to charge the members of the ANC with inciting riots and fighting the government. He was given life imprisonment. Now, that was actually kind of lucky for him because there was a big push to have him killed, to have him give the death penalty. But instead, he was given life imprisonment instead. So he was in jail for a long, long time. And then after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the National Party, led by de Klerk, moved to legalize the ANC and open up the country. They realized at that point that there was no goodness, there was no good thing coming out of the system that they had set up, and that having single party rule was actually hurting the country. And so de Klerk decided that he had to open up and have free and fair elections in South Africa. Mandela and de Klerk negotiated the end of apartheid in the early 90s, so they talked with each other and they kind of negotiated giving things to each, kind of trading things that each other wanted out of the situation to make sure that there was a fair and open discussion about how they were going to move forward as a country. And then the black majority were finally allowed to vote, and the ANC won the majority of the legislature votes. That would make Mandela the president in 1994. So he became the first black president of South Africa after years and years and years of institutionalized racism. Now, as the president of South Africa, his presidency was focused on national reconciliation, right? He had to figure out how to take the two extremely segregated parts of South Africa, the white part and the black part, and reconcile them into one nation, make them unified in some way, instead of two different nations coexisting in the same borders. He tried to shift South Africa towards development for everybody, not just for the white population. His foreign policy focused on advocating for diplomacy and nonviolence in other nations and other conflicts. When Mandela retired, he focused on activism and philanthropy. One note about his foreign policy, he was oftentimes seen with people like Gaddafi and other people who are dictators, but who had also resisted colonial rule and racism. So he was often judged for those relationships. However, he was trying to be friendly with other countries that had faced the racism and colonialism that he had faced. So it's kind of a two-sided issue that people have seen. A lot of, obviously, white European countries are upset that he's with someone like Gaddafi, who's a murderer and does bad things. But on the other side, right, he's trying to forge friendships with other countries that have had similar experiences as South Africa. So always two sides to each story. Thank you so much for watching this video about Nelson Mandela. He was a great man, and his passing was an immeasurable loss to the world back in it was 2013. I hope you learned something about this great man and that it sparks you to kind of look further into his life and what he was able to accomplish and do. And we'll see you next time for some more historical biographies. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye.